Commander Velkara stood in the docking bay of Station Gamma 7, watching the human ship approach through the viewport. The vessel looked wrong to Velkara's eyes. It was smaller than standard military craft, with panels that seemed mismatched and modifications welded onto the hull in ways that violated at least 15 safety protocols. The ship's name was painted on the side in bold letters. Valiant Velkara had served in the Xinthian Collective's peacekeeping fleet for 43 years. In that time, the commander had evaluated dozens of species applying to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. Most were granted provisional membership after demonstrating proper tactical knowledge and adherence to standard military doctrine. A few were rejected for failing to meet basic requirements. The humans were different. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, making them infants by galactic standards. Their technology was crude, their weapons outdated, and their strategic thinking was reportedly chaotic. Yet somehow they had managed to push back 3 separate pirate incursions in their sector, without coalition support. The Galactic Council wanted to know how. That was why Velkara was here. To observe, evaluate, and report on whether humanity deserved a seat at the table with civilized species. The Valiant docked with a slight bump that made Velkara's primary eyes twitch. A proper pilot would have made that connection smoothly. The airlock hissed open and the human crew emerged. Captain Jake Morrison was the first through the door. He was tall by human standards, with short dark hair going gray at the temples and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore a uniform that was neat but showed signs of repeated repair. Behind him came his second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes, a woman with her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Commander Velkara," Morrison said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. "It's an honor to meet you. We've heard a lot about the Xinthian fleet." Velkara looked at the offered hand for a moment before remembering that humans engaged in physical contact as a greeting. The commander reached out with one of 4 arms and grasped Morrison's hand briefly. The human's grip was firm and warm. "Captain Morrison," Velkara replied, "I have been assigned to evaluate your crew's readiness for coalition operations. I trust you will cooperate fully with all assessment protocols." "Of course," Morrison said with that easy smile. "We're looking forward to learning from you. The Xinthians have centuries of experience we can only dream of." The statement seemed sincere, but Velkara detected something else in the human's tone. Confidence, perhaps, or stubbornness. It was difficult to read human expressions with only 2 eyes and such mobile facial features. Over the next hour, Morrison introduced Velkara to the senior staff. There was Sergeant Danny Cole, a stocky man with a shaved head and numerous scars visible on his arms. He was responsible for the ship's marine complement. When introduced, Cole grinned and said, "4 eyes, huh? Bet you never miss anything, Commander." Velkara stiffened. Among Xinthians, commenting on someone's physical features was considered extremely rude, but Morrison just laughed and shook his head. "Cole, try to be professional for at least the first day." "Sorry, Captain," Cole said, though he was still grinning. "Just making conversation." Velkara didn't understand the humor but noted the lack of formal discipline in the exchange. In a Xinthian crew, such casual behavior between ranks would result in formal reprimand. The tour of the Valiant confirmed Velkara's initial assessment. The ship was a patchwork of systems from different manufacturers, jury-rigged together in ways that shouldn't work but apparently did. The weapons were older models, less efficient than Coalition standard. The shields ran on a power distribution system that Velkara's tactical computer calculated had a 12% chance of catastrophic failure under sustained fire. "I know it doesn't look like much," Lieutenant Hayes said as they walked through the engineering section. "But she's reliable where it counts. Chief Greg Stone keeps everything running smooth." A man covered in grease looked up from where he was elbow-deep in a power conduit. "Damn right I do," he called out. "This girl's got more heart than any fancy Coalition cruiser." "Heart?" Velkara asked. "The ship is a machine. It does not possess a cardiovascular system." Hayes smiled. "It's a figure of speech, Commander. Humans tend to personify things we care about. The Valiant has been our home for 3 years. She's brought us through some tough situations. Emotion is not relevant to mechanical function," Velkara observed. "Maybe not," Hayes agreed, "but it's relevant to the people operating the machine. We trust this ship because we know every bolt and wire in her. That counts for something." Velkara made notes in the evaluation file. Trust and emotion appeared repeatedly in human responses. It was inefficient. Proper military operation should be based on calculated probability and tactical doctrine, not feelings about machinery. The briefing room was small, with a round table that barely fit everyone. Morrison pulled up star charts showing their patrol route through the Helios frontier. It was a standard sweep pattern, meant to check on civilian outposts and watch for pirate activity. The route should take us 4 days, Morrison explained. Nice and easy. Give us time to run some joint exercises, let you see how we operate. Your tactical approach to engagement scenarios? Velkara asked. Morrison and Hayes exchanged a glance. We adapt to the situation, Morrison said. Standard doctrine is useful, but things rarely go according to plan. We train our people to think on their feet and make decisions in the moment. That sounds like insufficient preparation, Velkara said. Proper military operation requires predetermined response protocols for all likely scenarios. All due respect, Commander, Hayes said. We've found that rigid protocols can get people killed. Sometimes you have to trust your gut and do what feels right. Feels right is not a tactical parameter, Velkara replied. Cole, who had been quiet until now, leaned back in his chair. With respect, Commander. In my experience, the best plans last until first contact with the enemy. After that, it's about adapting, covering your squad mates, and getting everyone home alive. Not everyone can come home from every engagement, Velkara said. Acceptable loss calculations are necessary for military planning. The room went quiet. Morrison's expression changed, the smile fading. Commander, we don't do acceptable losses. Every person on this ship matters. We don't leave people behind, and we don't write anyone off as an acceptable cost. That is emotionally appealing but tactically unsound, Velkara said. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary for mission success. Maybe, Morrison said quietly. But we decide that in the moment, not before we even start. And we never sacrifice someone without exhausting every other option first. Velkara made more notes. The humans seemed to operate on principles that contradicted basic military efficiency. It was puzzling how they had survived their encounters with pirates using such flawed methodology. The first day of joint operations began the next morning. Both ships departed the station and began the patrol route. Velkara's vessel, the Swift Judgment, was a proper Xinthian cruiser, sleek, efficient, and equipped with the latest coalition technology. It moved through space with calculated precision. The Valiant moved like its crew, confident but unconventional. Hayes piloted the ship with a style that made Velkara's tactical computer flag multiple safety concerns, but she never actually violated safe operational parameters. She just came close, constantly. You fly aggressively, Velkara observed from the bridge where Morrison had invited the commander to observe. I fly effectively, Hayes corrected with a slight smile. Aggressive is when you take unnecessary risks. I only take the necessary ones. How do you calculate necessary risk? Velkara asked. I don't calculate, Hayes said. I feel it. You know when you're pushing too hard because the ship tells you. The ship communicates with you? Velkara was confused. I see no indication of artificial intelligence in your systems. Not with words, Commander, Morrison interjected. But when you've flown the same ship long enough, you know how she responds. You feel it in the vibrations, hear it in the engine pitch. Hayes knows the Valiant better than anyone. This concept of feeling and knowing without data was foreign to Velkara. Xinthian pilots relied on sensor readings and tactical computers to make decisions. The idea of trusting intuition seemed dangerously unreliable, yet the humans seemed to function well with this approach. The crew moved with easy coordination, anticipating each other's needs without constant communication. When Cole ran a drill with his Marines, they operated as a cohesive unit, despite what Velkara noted was minimal verbal instruction. How do they know what to do without orders? Velkara asked Morrison. Training and trust, Morrison replied. They know each other. They've been through situations together. Cole knows his people and they know him. They don't need constant direction. This seems inefficient, Velkara said. Clear chains of command and explicit orders ensure proper execution. Maybe, Morrison said. But it also means my people can act immediately when situations change. They don't have to wait for orders when seconds count. Velkara watched the Marines move through their drill. Despite the lack of... The distress signal came on the third day of patrol. during what should have been a routine scan of the outer colonies. Velcara was on the bridge of the Swift Judgment when the emergency broadcast cut through all other communications. This is Outpost Tertius 7 to any Coalition vessels in range. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Multiple hostile ships. They're Krithak raiders. Our shields are failing. We have civilians, including children. Please, someone help us. The transmission was followed by the sounds of weapons fire and screaming before it cut to static. Velcara's tactical computer immediately began analyzing the situation. Outpost Tertius 7 was a mining colony with a population of approximately 850 civilians from multiple species. The facility had minimal defenses designed only to deter small pirate raids. Krithak raiders were far more dangerous. The Krithak were a savage species, known throughout the galaxy for their brutality. They took no prisoners, left no survivors, and treated every encounter as total warfare. A Krithak raiding party in that sector meant certain death for everyone on Tertius 7, unless help arrived quickly. Velcara's computer calculated response options. The Swift Judgment and the Valiant were the closest Coalition vessels. The next nearest ships were 7 hours away, but sensor data showed at least 12 Krithak ships in the system, possibly more. Standard protocol in such situations was clear. Establish a defensive perimeter, call for reinforcements, and do not engage superior forces without tactical advantage. Commander, Velcara's communications officer said, Captain Morrison is requesting immediate conference. Morrison's face appeared on the screen before Velcara could respond. Commander, you heard that transmission? We need to move now. Negative, Captain, Velcara said. We are outnumbered at least 6 to 1. Engagement would be tactically unsound. Protocol requires we call for backup and establish defensive positions. Backup is 7 hours out, Morrison said, his voice tight. Those people don't have 7 hours. They probably don't have 2 hours. We're going in. That is not your decision to make, Velcara said. I am the senior officer on this patrol. We will follow proper procedure. Morrison's jaw clenched. Commander, there are families down there, children. My sensors show 43 Xinthian citizens among the colony population. Your people. We can't just leave them to die. I am not proposing we leave them, Velcara said, feeling an unfamiliar discomfort at Morrison's words. But we must wait for sufficient force to ensure mission success. 2 ships against 12 or more is suicide. Maybe, Morrison said, but it's a chance. If we wait 7 hours, it's not a chance. It's a certainty. Those people will all be dead. Some losses are unavoidable in military operations, Velcara said, repeating the doctrine that had been drilled into every Xinthian officer. We cannot save everyone. Morrison's expression changed. The easygoing human Velcara had come to know over the past 3 days vanished. In his place was something harder, something fierce. You might not be able to save everyone, Morrison said quietly, but we're damn well going to try. The Valiant is moving to intercept. You can come with us or wait for backup. Your choice, Commander. The screen went dark. Velcara watched through the viewport as the Valiant's engines flared bright and the ship accelerated toward Tertius 7 at maximum speed. Velcara's tactical computer was unambiguous in its assessment. The humans were committing suicide. Even if they reached the colony, they couldn't hold off a Krithak raiding party long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The logical course was to let them go, preserve the Swift Judgment, and report their reckless decision to Coalition Command. But Velcara thought about the past 3 days. The human crew eating together, laughing together, treating each other like family. Morrison saying, "We don't leave people behind." Cole grinning as he talked about keeping his people safe. Hayes trusting her instincts to fly the ship. "Helm," Velcara said. "Follow the Valiant. Maximum speed." The helmsman turned, all 4 eyes wide with surprise. "Commander?" "Our orders." "I am aware of protocol," Velcara said. "But there are Xinthian citizens in that colony. They are our people. Follow the humans." The Swift Judgment leaped forward, pursuing the Valiant into what Velcara's computer calculated was a 78% probability of destruction. The journey to Tertius 7 took 43 minutes at maximum speed. During that time, Velcara tried to reach Morrison several times, hoping to coordinate a tactical approach. The human captain didn't respond. He was too busy, Hayes explained briefly, working out an attack plan with his senior staff. Finally, 15 minutes from the system, Morrison's face reappeared on screen. He looked tired but focused. "Commander," Morrison said, "I'm glad you're coming. I know this goes against your training, but I appreciate it." "I am not certain this is the correct decision," Velkara admitted. "My computer gives us poor odds of success." "Probably accurate," Morrison said. "But here's what I'm thinking. The Krithak are focused on the colony. They're not expecting resistance, so we might get one good strike before they realize we're here. I'm going to come in fast. Target their ships in orbit, try to draw them away from the colony. If we can pull them into a running fight, maybe we can buy time for those people to evacuate." "You plan to use your ship as bait," Velkara said. "That's the idea," Morrison agreed. "The Valiant is smaller and faster. We can probably outrun their cruisers if we don't take too many hits. Meanwhile, the Swift Judgment has better shields and weapons. You hit them from a different angle, make them split their attention. This is a strategy that relies on the enemy making mistakes," Velkara pointed out. "Most strategies do," Morrison said, "but the Krithak are used to easy targets. They hunt civilians and small merchant ships. They're not expecting 2 military vessels to jump them in the middle of a raid. Surprise is on our side, at least for the first few minutes." "And after those minutes?" Velkara asked. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "After that, we adapt. Make it up as we go. Trust each other to do our jobs." "That is not reassuring, Captain." "No," Morrison agreed, "but it's all we've got." The transmission ended, and Velkara prepared the crew for combat. The Xinthians moved with practiced efficiency, running through pre-battle checks and ensuring all systems were optimal. It was the proper way to prepare for engagement. On the Valiant, Velkara imagined the humans were doing something entirely different. Probably joking, probably checking on each other, probably trusting in luck and instinct rather than tactical computers. It shouldn't work. But Velkara had seen them operate for 3 days now, and they did work. Somehow, these illogical, emotional, reckless humans made it work. The 2 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Tertius 7 system. The scene that greeted them was worse than expected. 15 Krithak ships, not 12. 3 heavy cruisers in orbit were bombarding the colony's shields with sustained plasma fire. Smaller raiding vessels circled like predators, waiting for the shields to fail so they could deploy ground forces. The colony's defenses were firing back, but it was clear they were losing. The shield dome over the main settlement flickered and sparked with each hit. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison," came the broadcast over the general channel. "We have one shot at this. Make it count." The Valiant didn't slow down. It came screaming into the system at a speed that made Velkara's tactical computer flash red warnings. Hayes was piloting, and she flew the ship like it was an extension of her own body, diving through the gap between 2 Krithak cruisers before they could react. The Valiant's weapons fired in a continuous stream, raking across the nearest cruiser's engines. Explosions blossomed along the Krithak ship's hull. It wasn't enough to destroy the vessel, but it got their attention. "All right, you bastards," Morrison's voice came over the comm. "You want to fight? Come get us." The Krithak fleet reacted with immediate violence. 6 ships broke off from the colony assault and turned toward the Valiant, weapons charging. Morrison's ship was already moving, diving and weaving through space in patterns that defied standard tactical doctrine. Velkara saw the opportunity. "Helm, bring us in from above. Target their lead cruiser's shield generators. All weapons, fire on my command." The Swift Judgment came in from a different angle, shields at maximum. The Krithak hadn't noticed them yet, focused on the smaller, more aggressive human ship. It was the advantage Morrison had predicted. "Fire," Velkara ordered. The Xinthian ship's weapons, more powerful and precise than the Valiant's, struck the Krithak cruiser's weak points with calculated accuracy. The shield generators overloaded in a cascade of blue fire. The cruiser's shields collapsed. Now the Krithak knew there were 2 enemies. The raiding party's cohesion broke as ships turned to face threats from multiple directions. Some continued attacking the colony, but others moved to engage the Swift Judgment and Valiant. "It's working," Hayes' voice came over the comm. "They're splitting up." "Not enough," Morrison responded. "There's still too many on the colony. Cole, get your Marines ready. If we can create an opening, we're going down there." Velkara's tactical computer updated the battle assessment. The humans planned to deploy ground forces while outnumbered in space. It was insane. It violated every principle of military engagement. "Captain Morrison," Velkara said over the D. The space battle had been raging for 27 minutes when Morrison made his next impossible decision. The Valiant was badly damaged, running on auxiliary power with no shields and fires on 3 decks. The Swift Judgment had taken hits too, though Velkara's ship was in better condition. They had managed to destroy 2 Krithak raiders and damage several others, but the enemy still had overwhelming numerical advantage. Below them, the colony's shields were at 15% and failing fast. "Commander Velkara," Morrison's voice came over the channel, rough with exhaustion. "We need to put people on the ground now." Velkara looked at the tactical display. 8 Krithak ships were still in orbit or approaching. 3 more were damaged but combat-capable. The colony would fall within minutes. "Captain, ground deployment under these conditions." "I know," Morrison interrupted. "But if we don't get down there, everyone in that colony dies. My Marines are ready. We'll drop in, establish a perimeter around the main shelter, and start evacuation. You keep these ships off our backs as long as you can." "We cannot hold 15 ships indefinitely," Velkara said. "Don't need indefinitely," Morrison replied. "Just need long enough." "Will you help us, Commander?" Velkara calculated the odds. They were terrible, but the alternative was to watch civilians die from orbit while doing nothing. "I will assign a squad to support your operation," Velkara said. "Prepare for drop pod deployment." "You're sending your people down?" Morrison sounded surprised. "You said we don't leave people behind," Velkara said. "Those civilians include Xinthian families." "I am beginning to understand your philosophy, Captain." "Glad to hear it," Morrison said. And even through the stress, Velkara heard warmth in his voice. "Try not to get killed up there. We'll need a ride home." "The same applies to you, Captain." Velkara turned to the tactical station. "Prepare drop pods for ground deployment. I am leading the support squad personally." The crew reacted with visible shock. Xinthian commanders did not typically deploy to ground operations. Command was most effective from orbit, coordinating the larger battle. But Velkara needed to understand these humans better, and that required being beside them in the fight. 5 minutes later, Velkara was sealed inside a drop pod with 3 other Xinthian soldiers. The pod bay doors opened to reveal the planet below, covered in smoke from fires started by the orbital bombardment. "All teams, this is Sergeant Cole," came the voice over the comm. "Drop in 30 seconds, LZ is hot. Expect heavy resistance. Remember your training, watch each other's backs, and let's bring everyone home alive." "Understood," Velkara replied. "Commander, good to have you with us," Cole said. "Try to keep up." The drop pods launched in a staggered pattern, 23 from the Valiant and 4 from the Swift Judgment. They fell through the atmosphere like meteors, shields glowing red from friction. Velkara's tactical display showed Krithak ships firing at the pods, but the Swift Judgment and Valiant intercepted most of the shots. The ground rushed up. The pods' retro rockets fired, slowing their descent but not eliminating the bone-jarring impact. Velkara's pod hit hard, throwing the commander against the restraints. The doors blew off with explosive charges and Velkara emerged into chaos. The colony was burning. Buildings had collapsed from the orbital strikes. The shield generators, massive structures in the center of the settlement, sparked and flickered as they struggled to maintain the protective dome. Civilians were running in every direction, some toward the shelters, others simply fleeing in panic. And there were Krithak on the ground. A raiding ship must have landed during the bombardment. The massive creatures, each standing 3 meters tall with armored hides and multiple arms ending in razor claws, were moving through the streets. They killed anything that moved. "All teams, form up on me," Cole's voice commanded. "Alpha team, secure the main shelter. Beta team, eastern approach. Charlie team, with me to the generator complex. Commander Velkara, what's your position?" "Southeast quadrant," Velkara replied, already moving with the Xinthian squad toward the sounds of weapons fire. "We have visual on Krithak ground forces. Copy that. Link up with Charlie team. We're 200 meters north of your position." Velkara's squad moved through the ruined streets. The commander's 4 eyes gave superior peripheral vision, allowing awareness of threats from multiple angles. A Krithak raider emerged from a collapsed building ahead. The creature roared, a sound that seemed to shake the ground, and charged. "Fire," Velkara ordered. The Xinthian weapons were precise, energy beams that cut through the Krithak's armor with calculated efficiency. The creature fell, but 2 more appeared behind it. Combat doctrine suggested tactical withdrawal to a defensive position. Instead, Velkara thought of Morrison flying his damaged ship directly into danger to protect others. "Advance," Velkara commanded. "Clear the street." They pushed forward, weapons firing in coordinated patterns. One Krathak got close enough to strike, its claws raking across a Xinthian soldier's armor. The armor held barely, and the other squad members focused fire to bring the creature down. Cole's team came into view ahead, taking cover behind an overturned transport vehicle. The sergeant was firing his weapon with one hand while directing his Marines with the other. When he saw Velkara approach, he grinned despite the blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. "Commander, nice timing," Cole shouted over the weapon's fire. "We need to get to that shelter. Got about 30 civilians pinned down inside with Krithak between us and them. What is your plan?" Velkara asked, taking position beside Cole. "Plan is we kill anything ugly and save everyone inside," Cole replied. "Not complicated." "There are at least 8 Krithak between our position and the shelter," Velkara said. "We are outnumbered." "Yeah," Cole agreed, checking his weapons charge. "But we've got something they don't. We give a damn about those people. Marines, on my signal, we push forward. Commander, your people provide covering fire from here. When we're halfway, you advance to our current position. Leapfrog pattern." It was a simple tactic, one taught in basic training across every species, but the humans executed it with a coordination that seemed almost instinctive. Cole called the signal and his Marines moved forward as one unit. Velkara's squad provided covering fire, and the humans ran through the gap, weapons firing, never stopping. A Krithak rose up directly in front of Private Amy Chen, the young medic Velkara remembered from the mess hall. The creature's claw swept toward her. Chen didn't retreat. She rolled under the strike and came up inside the Krithak's reach, firing her weapon point-blank into the creature's chest. The Krithak fell. "Charlie, team in position," Cole called. "Commander, move up." Velkara's squad advanced to the transport vehicle while the humans provided covering fire. Back and forth they moved, humans and Xinthians working together, each team protecting the other as they pushed toward the shelter. They reached the shelter entrance just as another Krithak emerged from inside. The creature had blood on its claws and was dragging something. A child. A small Xinthian child who was screaming in terror. Cole didn't hesitate. He dropped his weapon and charged the Krithak, pulling a combat knife from his belt. The sergeant was smaller than the creature by half, but he hit it like he mattered more. The knife found gaps in the Krithak's armor, and Cole drove it deep into the creature's neck. The Krithak dropped the child and turned on Cole with a roar of rage. Its claws caught Cole across the chest, cutting through armor and into flesh. Cole grunted in pain but didn't let go of his knife, twisting it deeper. Velkara was moving before conscious thought, all 4 arms bringing weapons to bear. The commander's shots hit the Krithak from behind, burning through its spine. Chen was there a moment later, firing from another angle. The combined assault brought the creature down. Cole fell to one knee, blood pouring from the wounds on his chest. Chen was beside him immediately, medical supplies appearing from her pack. But Cole pushed her hands away and looked at Velkara. "The kid," he said through gritted teeth. "Check the kid." Velkara moved to the small Xinthian child who was crying but appeared physically unharmed. The commander picked up the child carefully. "She is alive. Frightened but not injured." "Good," Cole said, letting Chen start treating his wounds. "That's good." More civilians emerged from the shelter, eyes wide with fear. There were 32 of them, Velkara counted. Multiple species, including 17 more Xinthian citizens. Many were injured. Several were children. "All teams, this is Morrison." The captain's voice came over the comm, strained and cutting in and out. "Enemy dreadnought entering the system. Heavy cruiser class. We cannot hold orbit much longer. Begin evacuation immediately." "Copy that, Captain," Cole responded. "We've got civilians ready for extraction." "How many can you take?" "As many as you can get to us," Morrison replied. "We'll make room." "Commander Velkara," Cole said, looking up at the Xinthian officer while Chen wrapped his chest wounds. "We need to get these people to the landing zone. That's 300 meters through streets crawling with Krithak. My people are spread out across the colony securing other shelters. I've got maybe 8 Marines I can pull together. Not enough to protect 32 civilians. The logical choice is to move in small groups," Velkara said. "Better chance that some will survive." The dropship shook violently as it climbed through the atmosphere under heavy fire from Krithak ground batteries. Velkara held onto a support rail with 2 arms, while using the other two to steady a Xinthian child who had been separated from her parents in the chaos. The child clung to the commander, too frightened to cry anymore. Around them, civilians huddled together regardless of species. A human woman held a Xinthian infant. A Vicarian male supported an injured human elder. In this moment, with death reaching for them from below and uncertain salvation above, the usual boundaries between species meant nothing. Private Chen was moving through the crowded compartment, treating injuries as best she could in the confined space. Sergeant Cole sat against the bulkhead, his chest wrapped in trauma bandages that were already showing blood seepage. He should have been unconscious from his injuries, but he remained alert, his eyes scanning the civilians as if counting them repeatedly to ensure they were all still there. "Hang on," the pilot's voice came over the internal comm. "Breaking atmosphere in 10 seconds. The ship lurched and several civilians cried out in fear. Then the shaking smoothed out as they left the planet's gravity well behind. Through the small viewport, Velkara could see the battle still raging in orbit. The swift Judgment was moving in defensive patterns, shields flickering under sustained fire. The Valiant looked worse, parts of its hull glowing red from damage, but it was still fighting, still drawing enemy fire away from the evacuation ships. "All evacuation vessels. This is Captain Morrison," came the transmission. "Good work down there. We're clearing you a path back to the ships. Stay tight and keep moving." The dropship accelerated toward the Valiant. Around it, 4 other evacuation craft carried the rest of the rescued civilians. Velkara's tactical link to the Swift Judgment showed they had saved 412 people from the colony. Not all who had been there, but far more than should have been possible given the circumstances. It had cost them. Private Scott was dead on the surface. 2 more Marines had died holding the landing zone. The Swift Judgment had lost 6 crew members when a Krythak raider managed a suicide run against the ship's engineering section. And the battle was far from over. "Enemy dreadnought powering weapons," Morrison's voice came again, tighter now. "All evac ships emergency burn. Get to the Valiant now." The dropship's engine screamed as the pilot pushed them to maximum. Velkara's tactical display showed why. The Krythak dreadnought, a massive vessel 3 times the size of the Swift Judgment, had moved into firing position. Its main weapons, powerful enough to crack a planet's crust, were targeting the evacuation fleet. "Morrison, what are you doing?" Velkara heard Lieutenant Hayes' voice over the open channel. "Jake, that's suicide. Getting these people home, Lisa," Morrison replied. "Like always." The Valiant turned, damaged and barely functional, and put itself between the dreadnought and the evacuation ships. The human vessel was tiny compared to the Krythak monster, like an insect facing a predator. "All power to forward shields," Morrison ordered his crew. "Hang on, everyone," the dreadnought fired. A beam of purple energy, wide enough to engulf the Valiant completely, lanced across space. It hit the human ship dead center. The Valiant's shields flared impossibly bright, holding for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then they collapsed. The beam burned into the ship's hull, cutting through armor, through decks, through everything in its path. "No," Velkara said, pressing against the viewport. The Xinthian child in the commander's arms was crying again, sensing something terrible was happening. "Morrison, respond," Hayes was shouting over the comm. "Jake, answer me." "Valiant, respond." Silence. The dreadnought's weapon cut off. Where the Valiant had been, there was now only debris and fire. The evacuation ships continued their burn toward where the Valiant had been. The Swift Judgment moved to intercept the dreadnought. All weapons firing, but it was too small, too weak to stop such a massive vessel. Then something impossible happened. The debris field that had been the Valiant moved. Not drifting with momentum, but moving with purpose. From the fire and wreckage, what remained of the human ship emerged. The entire forward section was gone. The port side looked like it had been peeled open by a giant hand. Fires burned across multiple decks, but the engines were still firing and the ship was still moving. "Valiant to all ships," came Morrison's voice, hoarse but alive. "We're still here." Evac ships continued to docking. Swift Judgment, hit that dreadnought's port weapons cluster. "We're going to try something stupid." "Captain, your ship cannot survive another hit," Velkara said, finding their voice again. "Probably not," Morrison agreed. "But that thing needs 15 seconds to recharge its main weapon. We've got 14 seconds to make it regret shooting at us. Hayes, you still with me?" "Still here, Captain," Hayes replied, her voice shaking. "Helm is responding, barely. That's all we need. Take us in." The Valiant, more wreckage than ship, accelerated toward the dreadnought. The Krythak vessel launched interceptor fire, smaller weapons trying to destroy the approaching threat. The Valiant flew through the weapons fire, taking hits it couldn't afford to take, burning and breaking apart piece by piece. "Commander Velkara," Morrison said. "That weapons cluster on the Dreadnought's port side. Big target, lots of power signatures. Think you can hit it?" Velkara was already transmitting targeting data to the Swift Judgment. "Weapons are locked on target." "Good," Morrison said. "When I give the word, hit it with everything you've got. We'll only get one shot at this." The Valiant was closing with the Dreadnought now, close enough that Velkara could see individual hull plates on the Krythak ship. The Dreadnought's main weapon was glowing, building charge for another shot that would finish the human vessel. "Now," Morrison said. The Swift Judgment fired every weapon simultaneously. Energy beams and projectiles converged on the Dreadnought's weapons cluster. At the same moment, what remained of the Valiant's weapons fired at the same point. The combined assault struck with precisely calculated force against precisely the right target. The weapons cluster exploded. The explosion chain reacted through the Dreadnought's power distribution system. Secondary explosions blossomed along the ship's port side. The main weapons charge overloaded, and instead of firing outward, it discharged into the Dreadnought's own systems. The Krythak Dreadnought, unstoppable moments before, went dark. "Dead in space. Got you," Morrison said softly. The remaining Krythak ships, seeing their command vessel disabled, began to retreat. They jumped to faster-than-light speed one by one, abandoning the system. The battle was over. Velkara's dropship docked with the Swift Judgment, unable to reach the Valiant due to the damage. The commander helped evacuate civilians, ensuring they were all accounted for and receiving medical care. The Xinthian child still clung to Velkara, refusing to let go until a medic confirmed that her parents were alive and in another section of the ship. Once the immediate crisis was handled, Velkara requested transport to the Valiant. What the commander found there was devastating. The human ship's forward section was simply gone, open to space with emergency force fields barely holding atmosphere in the remaining sections. 14 more crew members had died in the Dreadnought's attack. Engineering was running on backup systems. Life support was failing in 3 sections, but the crew was working, not celebrating their impossible survival, not resting despite their injuries. They were repairing what could be repaired, treating the wounded, and accounting for every person aboard, including the civilians they had rescued. Velkara found Morrison on what remained of the bridge, getting his own injuries treated by a medic, while simultaneously coordinating repair efforts. His left arm was in a sling, and burns covered the right side of his face, but he was still directing his crew with the same calm authority he had shown since Velkara first met him. "Commander," Morrison said, attempting a smile that turned into a wince of pain. "Thanks for the assist with that Dreadnought." "Good shooting." "Captain, your ship is destroyed," Velkara said. "She's hurt," Morrison corrected. "But not destroyed? As long as we can keep her together, the Valiant isn't done yet." Velkara looked around the ruined bridge. "You sacrificed your ship to save the evacuation vessels. That was not a rational decision." "No," Morrison agreed, "but it was the right one. Those ships were full of people we rescued. We didn't save them just to let them die in space. So we did what needed doing." "You almost died," Velkara said. "Yeah," Morrison said, "but we didn't, and everyone on those evac ships is alive, so I'd call that a win." Lieutenant Hayes approached, her uniform torn and blood matting her blonde hair. "Captain, we've got a problem. Life support is failing faster than we can repair it. We need to evacuate the crew to the Swift Judgment until we can get the Valiant to a repair station." "How long until coalition reinforcements arrive?" Morrison asked. 43 minutes, Velkara replied, checking the tactical display. "We can hold that long," Morrison said. "Tell the crew to keep working on those repairs. We're not abandoning the Valiant unless we absolutely have to." Velkara watched the human crew continue their desperate efforts to save their ship. They were exhausted, injured, mourning their dead, but they didn't stop. The concept of giving up didn't seem to exist in there. 3 days had passed since the battle at Tertius 7. The Coalition flagship, Eternal Vigilance, served as temporary home for the Valiant's crew and the rescued civilians while decisions were made about repairs, medical care, and the future. Velkara had spent those days writing reports, providing testimony to Coalition Command, and thinking about everything that had happened. The commander's official evaluation of humanity was due. It would determine whether humans gained full membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition or remained in provisional status for another decade of observation. Velkara's recommendation would carry significant weight due to first-hand experience with human military operations under combat conditions. The report had been difficult to write. How did one quantify courage that defied logic? How did one measure the value of refusing to calculate acceptable losses? Velkara's tactical computer could assess weapon efficiency, shield strength, and tactical decisions. But it couldn't measure what Velkara had seen in Morrison's eyes when he ordered his ship to block the dreadnought's fire. It couldn't calculate the worth of Private Scott pushing civilians to safety at the cost of his own life. So Velkara wrote something unprecedented in 3 centuries of Xinthian military reports. The commander wrote about emotion, about sacrifice, about the terrifying beauty of beings who cared so deeply they would die for strangers. The computer flagged every third sentence as irregular or non-standard. Velkara ignored the warnings and kept writing. The commander was finishing the final paragraphs when a message arrived requesting Velkara's presence in the medical bay. It was from Sergeant Cole. Velkara found Cole sitting on a medical bed, his chest still heavily bandaged but looking much better than 3 days ago. The sergeant was teaching that same Xinthian child, the one Velkara had carried in the dropship, how to play a human card game. The child was laughing and her parents sat nearby watching with grateful expressions. "Commander," Cole said, looking up with that familiar grin, "thanks for coming. Wanted to say goodbye before you headed back to the Swift Judgment. You are being released from medical care?" Velkara asked. "Doc says I'm stubborn enough to heal just fine," Cole replied. "Besides, Captain Morrison needs help coordinating the crew. We're short-handed with all the casualties." The Xinthian child showed Velkara the card she was holding. "Sergeant Cole is teaching me poker. He says it's a game of skill and luck. Mostly luck for her," Cole said with a wink. "She's won the last 3 hands." "Kid's a natural." The child's mother stood and approached Velkara. She was a Xinthian civilian, a researcher who had been studying mineral deposits on Tertius 7. "Commander, I wanted to thank you personally. You saved my daughter. You saved all of us." "The credit belongs to Captain Morrison and his crew," Velkara said. "They made the decision to fight when retreat would have been more logical. But you chose to follow them," the mother said. "You put yourself in danger for people you didn't know. For that you have my eternal gratitude. You have my family's gratitude." Velkara felt that unfamiliar sensation again, the one that had appeared when watching humans interact. It took a moment to identify it: emotional connection. The Xinthian commander had spent 43 years in military service focused on efficiency and protocol. 3 days with humans had changed something fundamental. "Your daughter was very brave," Velkara said to the mother. "She remained calm despite terrifying circumstances." "She told me about you carrying her in the dropship," the mother said. "She said you made her feel safe. Children know when someone truly cares about them." After the family left, Cole stood carefully and walked to the viewport with Velkara. Outside, repair crews were working on the Valiant. The damage was extensive, but the chief engineer had determined the ship could be saved. It would take months of work, but the Valiant would fly again. "You know what the worst part is?" Cole asked quietly, his earlier humor fading. "Having to write letters to the families. Scott, Martinez, Henderson, and the others. 42 good people who won't go home. I have to find words to tell their families that they died heroes, that they saved 412 civilians, that their sacrifice mattered. But no words make it easier. No explanation makes their loved ones hurt less. Why do you write the letters yourself?" Velkara asked. "Surely there are standard notifications that could be transmitted." "Because they deserve more than a standard notification," Cole said. "They deserve someone who knew them, who fought beside them to tell their families who they really were. It's the least I can do, the very least." "Yet you would do it again," Velkara observed. "If faced with the same situation tomorrow, you would make the same choices, accept the same losses." Cole looked directly at Velkara with eyes that had seen too much death, but refused to look away from it. "Every single time, Commander. Because the alternative is letting those 412 civilians die, and I can't live in a universe where I choose efficiency over people's lives. Maybe that makes me a bad soldier by your standards, but it makes me a soldier I can stand to be." "You are not a bad soldier," Velkara said. "You are perhaps the best soldier I have ever encountered. You simply measure success differently than my species has learned to measure it." Cole smiled sadly. Morrison said you were starting to get it. Understanding what drives us. I am beginning to, Velkara admitted. Though I confess it is terrifying. Why terrifying? Because you have shown me that the calculations I have relied on for my entire career are insufficient. You have shown me that sometimes the illogical choice is the moral choice, and accepting that means accepting that I have perhaps made wrong decisions in the past, prioritizing efficiency over individual lives. That realization is deeply unsettling. Cole put a hand on Velkara's shoulder, a gesture of comfort the commander was learning to recognize. Don't be too hard on yourself, Commander. You did things by the book because that's how you were trained, but you also followed us into that fight when your book said to wait for backup. You deployed to the surface when command doctrine said you should stay on your ship. You're learning. That's what matters. Captain Morrison said something similar, Velkara said. He told me I was starting to think like a human. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Cole asked. Velkara watched the repair crews working on the Valiant through the viewport. The ship had been broken, nearly destroyed, but the humans refused to abandon it. They would rebuild it, make it whole again, because it was their home and their families deserved a home worth fighting for. I believe, Velkara said slowly, that it is the best thing that has ever happened to me. The next day, Velkara was summoned to a formal hearing with Coalition High Command. 5 admirals from different species sat in judgment, reviewing the events at Tertius 7. The battle had been unusual enough to warrant high-level scrutiny, and there were concerns about protocol violations, unauthorized engagement, and excessive risk-taking. Velkara stood before the admirals and presented the full report, including tactical analysis, casualty figures, and civilian rescue statistics. The numbers were impressive. 412 civilians saved with only 42 military casualties. By any mathematical standard, it was a successful operation. But Admiral Thorne, a Vicarian who had served in the Coalition for 60 years, was not satisfied with numbers alone. Commander Velkara, Thorne said, his scaled face showing disapproval. You engaged 15 hostile vessels with only 2 ships. You violated standing orders to wait for reinforcements. You deployed ground forces into an unsecured combat zone. By all standard military doctrine, you should have waited for backup. Why didn't you? Because people were dying, Admiral, Velkara said simply, and Captain Morrison convinced me that some things are more important than doctrine. A human convinced you to violate 3 centuries of Zynthian military protocol? Another admiral asked, her tone suggesting this was somehow shameful. Yes, Velkara said, and in doing so he taught me what our protocols have perhaps forgotten. That military service is not about following rules. It is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Captain Morrison and his crew demonstrated that individual lives matter more than tactical efficiency. They showed me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. These are fine sentiments, Admiral Thorne said, but they don't change the fact that you could have lost both ships, all crew, and accomplished nothing. You gambled with military assets and personnel based on emotion rather than logic. I gambled on humans, Velkara corrected, and they exceeded every logical expectation. They fought with a determination that tactical computers cannot predict. They sacrificed with a willingness that casualty projections cannot calculate. They cared with an intensity that strategic analysis cannot measure. And because of that, 412 civilians are alive today who would otherwise be dead. Admiral Thorne leaned forward. And if you had failed? If the Krithak had destroyed both ships? Then we would have lost military assets, experienced personnel, and accomplished nothing. Then we would have died trying to save innocent lives, Velkara said, which seems to me a worthier end than surviving through cautious inaction. The chamber went silent. It was not the kind of response Coalition